Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
I mean,
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
What does confrontational mean? It means you'll fight for what you believe.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother!
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Tripp. Thank you to everyone that is watching this across all our platforms. If you are watching this live today on Facebook, Rumble, or YouTube, you can contribute to the conversation in the chat. I've also put the link in the description to StreamYard if you want to call in and ask a question. We've only got a tight half an hour today, so you'll have to be very, very brief with your questions and also with my questions as well. But just to get into it very, very quickly, I want to let you know how you can support us here at Commanding the Narrative. You can head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few donations there. Just like Tony did this week, she bought 5 coffees. She said outstanding interviews, great questions, and interesting guests. And of course, Pauline also had bought us 3 coffees as well. So thank you very much. It helps to pay for the stream, helps to pay for the website, and also most importantly, gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which is very important. If you want to stay up to date with everything that we're doing, please head to commandingthenarrative.com. Hit the sign up button in the top right hand corner and you'll get a weekly newsletter from me so you can keep up to date with all our podcasts, articles that I might write, or events coming up, future podcasts, things like that. It's the best way to stay up to date. Don't rely on social media, especially with these misinformation laws looming as we have. And also just quickly, just to finish, just a quick plug from me. I was published in The Spectator this week talking about nuclear energy, which is going to be a election issue, no doubt. So please check out that article, and I'll also be appearing on Alexandra Marshall, her program on ADH TV, talking about the same issue. But today we have a member of Parliament. He's a Nationals member for Page. He's been in the federal Parliament since 2013, and just this past week or two, he made a very impassionate speech in Parliament, pushing back against the misinformation and disinformation legislation that is being proposed and that a lot of people are concerned about. I think it was a great speech. We're going to talk to him about it today. Let's welcome him now, the Honourable Kevin Hogan from Page. Welcome to Commanding the Narrative, Kevin.
Oh, great to be here, Stephen. Thanks for your time.
No, it's my pleasure. I guess the main question is, what motivated you to make such a speech in Parliament?
Well, mate, I'd been speaking about this. We knew this was coming, this bill, the misinformation, disinformation bill. So I was pretty clear on how I thought about it. I mean, I always start from, I wouldn't call myself a completely pure libertarian, but it's certainly my starting point when we're looking at things. And but that day was interesting, actually. I was very busy in the morning. I didn't realize the legislation was coming up so quickly, and I came out of a meeting and I was about the second speaker on our side. So I just really jotted down about 4 or 5 points that I wanted to cover. But, to summarize it really briefly for you, I think I put free speech in a democracy as the number one important value that we have. And while tax is important, migration is important, energy is important, our IR laws are important, Before that, we have to have free speech. And I firmly believe that any extreme government, whether it be right-wing or left-wing, wants control. And I think this is an extreme left-wing government we have. And I thought that bill's about control.
I think people feel exactly the same way as you. I've got the clip. I might play some of it now if people haven't heard what you said in the speech. This was Kevin Hogan speaking in Parliament recently.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, all of us get up here every day of Parliament and we talk about bills that we're very passionate about. We talk about bills that we have strong opinions on. But Deputy Speaker, I say this quite sincerely. This is scary bill that I personally have ever got up to speak about. I am really, really scared and really... Oh, someone laughs. So, yeah, can't have a difference of opinion. No, that says it straight away, Deputy Speaker. Can't have a difference of opinion. I'm going to read out Voltaire. Voltaire, a French philosopher, Speaker. I disagree with everything you have said, but I will defend every day your right to say it. You might want to dwell on that over the other side there, or the members over the other side, Deputy Speaker, might want to dwell on that, because that's what this bill is undermining. I disagree with everything you say, but I will defend your right to say it. And what this Labor radical left-wing government is doing, Deputy Speaker, is abandoning that principle.
So as you can see, a very impassioned speech. One of the things I want to highlight is the member on the opposite side laughing at you when you said that you were scared about this bill. Now, the way that I look at it, and I assume that a lot of Australians look at that, they're also scared about this bill. And to see that the other side, the government that is pushing this, laughing at that reaction, what message does that send to the Australian people?
Well, I think to try to be respectful of them, Stephen, I don't think they understand the importance and the damage that this bill could do. I mean, that's the only thing I can say, because even the speaker that got up before me was saying and was talking about things like, the vaccinations. Now, I'm happy to say, look, I got vaccinated. I was okay to do that. But I tell you what, I know a lot of people who weren't. And I respected their opinion, and they'd researched it, and they had a difference of opinion from mine, and I respect that. Now, the speaker before me had actually got up and used that as an example of why we needed this bill, and and the example I gave in the speech about again, what else is this radical left-wing government said was misinformation or disinformation in the last 2.5 years, and of course we all remember the voice referendum, and they said what we were speaking about. I had really constitutional concerns about it. One, I thought it was dividing us by race, but I also had some huge constitutional questions about it. They said that was misinformation. Well, really? So we're going to give away our freedom of speech rights because you're not allowed to disagree with? I think it shows intellectual shallowness from the minister, from this Labor government, that they want to do this because they're not prepared to take on a debate. They're not prepared to discuss this. They want to shut people down instead. And I think it shows their intellectual shallowness that they wanted to bring down this bill.
But it's crazy as well, because the political pendulum will always swing, and Labor voters, Greens voters, all voters across the political spectrum should be concerned about this legislation, because the government will change at some point. Someone will be pulling the levers at some stage. I'm sure the coalition doesn't believe in censorship, or at least I hope they don't believe in it. But let's say, for example, a right-wing, nut job party rises up and takes government and then censors everyone on the left. I mean, they should be equally concerned about this legislation.
Well, that Voltaire quote, I don't know if it was Voltaire. It might have been a biographer of Voltaire and summarised his thought, that one about, I'll protect your right to say what you say, even though I might not agree. I've heard politicians say that on both sides.
Yeah,
that's not my quote. I've heard that quote in Parliament, and I've heard people on both sides of Parliament say that. Well, where are they? I mean, where are they? I mean, as you say, we could have a extreme right-wing party that would be the same. I think extreme right-wing and extreme left-wing parties ought to meet around the other side anyway. But this was a fundamental. Interesting too, Stephen. I was really happy to come on your show too for another reason. I found the mainstream media bizarrely quiet about this.
Yes, definitely.
And I have my theory on that. We see mainstream media losing numbers enormously to podcasts, to media programs on the internet. Now, we're all going to go and listen to what we think's interesting, but interesting that wasn't a lot of media coverage on it really. And I think it was a fundamental democratic right that we were talking about, and most of the mainstream media didn't hear beep out of them.
There's a lot that they don't want to cover these days. There's a lot that is swept under the rug while these bills are moving through Parliament. And I don't think a lot of the Australian public are aware of what is going on with some of this legislation that is being pushed through. But what do you think is the government's motivation for pushing bills like this one? We've also seen some other strange bills that they've been pushing through. I only heard yesterday about them trying to touch the Future Fund and get their grubby little hands on that. Where is all of this coming from?
Well, I think it comes from, this is a radical government we've got, and I mean, you talk about the Future Fund. It's a radical left-wing government. We see that in IR laws. We see it in a whole lot of things, energy, a whole lot of other things they're doing. But this is an intellectually shallow government. And I've even heard the Prime Minister get up in Parliament or say somewhere publicly, at least, that he doesn't like memes on social media about him. I mean, really, So we're gonna get rid of the court jester as well. We're not allowed to have the court jester anymore either. So that's where they're coming from. And I said it earlier. I think it's intellectually shallow, but it's also they're about control. This is seriously a control issue, and they do not like arguments that disagree with them, especially if people are getting on side of the argument they don't agree with. So, like any intellectually shallow ideologue, shut them down. Don't let them speak. Don't even let the court jester crack a joke.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in your speech, you mentioned George Orwell's 1984 and the Ministry of Truth. Now, a lot of people are asking the question, who determines what truth is? So if there is going to be this misinformation, disinformation legislation, that determination is going to have to get made based on whatever the issue is. Can you explain to people how this legislation will work, or the aims of how it will work?
Well, sort of. From what I understand, I certainly wouldn't understand how it exactly would work within. So we have an organisation called ACMA. That's the Australian Communications and Media Authority. So that's a government entity that has bureaucrats living and working in Canberra, sitting in it. And there would be the authority through this legislation, which, by the way, Stephen, when I spoke in Parliament, I wasn't sure what would happen with this legislation. I certainly knew it would go through the House of Reps. In the Senate, the Greens are on board with Labor as well. So they're nearly there with those two blocks. But it looks like we might have enough cross benches in the Senate to stop this. But anyway, back to how it would work. ACMA would be given the authority. Some part of ACMA would sit there. They'd literally be trolling the social media, and if there was an individual who was putting up information or sharing information too, and I'll draw the distinction to that too, Stephen, sharing information that they thought was misinformation or spreading disinformation, the government had the authority to fine the information provider. So if it was on Facebook, them, or it was on X, it'd be them, fine that platform quite a significant amount of money, 5% of their revenue, because of that. Now, what is the platform going to do in that case? They're going to not let virtually anything go up at the risk of being fined by the government. Now, to give you an example of what couldn't be put up, and I spoke to the Shadow Minister about this, and he confirmed this. That was even an individual couldn't share even necessarily something that I said in Parliament if the ACMA decided that what I said was misinformation. They couldn't even share a politician on their platform. So I could put it up. So there was a little bit of, I can say what I want in Parliament. The media could say what they want. There were protections around academics, so we know are mainly left-wing anyway. There were some protections around mainstream media, which, well over 50% of them, as we know, are left-wing activists as well. But private individuals couldn't share information even on platforms that were allowed elsewhere. So it was pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, it's very, very scary stuff. And what it's shown, I mean, he was pushing through this, pushing this into Parliament the day that we were hearing the election results from America. And that was a huge contrast for me. The direction that America now seems to be going under the leadership of Donald Trump and his administration and everyone that he has around, and the direction that Australia is now going under the Albanese government. In terms of just censorship alone. I mean, there's other issues as well. But I want to bring up some quotes that Donald Trump said recently. He said, the censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. And then he went on to say, the fight for free speech is a matter of victory or death for America and for the survival of Western civilization itself. So with America going in that direction and Australia going in an opposite direction, seemingly, how will that affect our relationship with America and the Trump administration?
Well, look, I think that's a really interesting point. Now, I think we have been quite kind on our side of politics about Kevin Rudd, who's the ambassador to the United States, as we know, for Australia. I think that some of the personal comments that he has made about Trump, given that Trump, when he made these comments, was or had been the president of a democratically elected country, I thought those comments that Rudd had made were quite infantile, really. They're like university activist type statements, not as an ex-prime minister, or certainly as what an ambassador should say. So I think with all due respect, and I think we've been quite lenient, I think Kevin Rudd is compromised in his position anyway. Now, the fact that we would then go down a path that not, and when I say this too, I still think that we as an Australian sovereign nation should do what we think are in the best interest of our country. So let me make the starting point that we shouldn't be afraid to upset the President of the United States or the President of China or the President of or Prime Minister of any other country. We should be not afraid of that, because we should be standing up for our sovereign rights. So let me say that as a starting point. But look, I think Rudd's compromised with what he said. I think, again, I'm very much on the free speech side. And I think some of the comments that have been made by the ones that you just quoted, I agree with anyway. So it certainly would place us in an interesting situation with people like Elon Musk.
Definitely. Now, you're in the Parliament, you're mixing with these people every single day, you're walking the corridors, well, not every day, but a lot of the time down in Canberra. And I'm sure that you're mixing with some of your Labor colleagues, and we know that Labor can't go against something that's been put up by the party. They can't cross the floor or anything like that. But without, obviously, I know you can't give any names, but are there any feelings that you're getting from the Labor Party that they're also concerned about this legislation?
Oh, absolutely. And look, and I know, and certainly won't name names, as you just alluded to and appreciate, is I know I could name 4 or 5 Labor politicians that I know that voted no to the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, I just know that is fact. I mean, they told me, and they had their own personal reservations about it for very valid reasons. And they're just the ones that I've spoken to. I mean, obviously, I haven't spoken. There's a lot of Labor MPs that I have hardly spoken to at all, or don't speak to very often at all. And they certainly wouldn't reveal to me those type of thoughts and processes. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's a number of them that would share our concerns on this bill as well.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the crossbench in the Senate have come out and said that they're going to be voting no against this. People like Fatima Payman and Lydia Thorpe apparently also said that she's going to be voting against it. It looks like the government won't have the numbers in the Senate, but you can't always rely on that, because there's always, last minute deals that happen and things. What's your gut feel about this bill? Will it get through? Are you confident that it's going to get pushed back?
Look, when I made my speech in the House of Reps, I probably thought it was going to go through. I don't trust a lot of those crossbenchers. Again, I won't name names, but we've done deals with some of those people before, and they've fallen over, and we didn't know they were going to fall over. But from public statements, being very public statements now, I am optimistic that it's going to fail, and that's going to be a good day for Australian democracy.
Yeah, well, let's cross our fingers and cross our toes and hope for the best. But look, I think this is an overarching issue as well. You just look at the Albanese leadership, even all the way back to the 2022 federal election, he was a bumbling fool on the campaign trail. He doesn't campaign very, very well. It almost felt like Labor didn't win. It was a vote against the Scott Morrison government, and that's how Albanese stumbled into Parliament. And ever since you've brought up the Voice, that was a huge failure for the Labor Party. I think this misinformation bill isn't going to wash very well with the Australian public. I mentioned the Future Fund issue that's just popped up as well. He seems to be making a lot of fundamental mistakes. But people are still saying that the coalition can't win the next federal election, and it's likely going to be a minority government with Labor having to form some sort of coalition with the Greens and the Teals, which for me, living in a Teal electorate, that sounds scary in itself. But what's your feel? Obviously, you're speaking to people on the ground. Can the coalition win this election, and is there a pathway to victory?
Look, I certainly think there is. I mean, history is against us, though. I mean, there's only been one-term government in the history of the Commonwealth of Australia since Federation, and that was in the Great Depression. And so that government fell over just after one term, and it's never happened other than that. I think so history is against us, and it's a big mountain to get to in one election. We got to remind ourselves that Labor had one of the lowest primary votes in history to win government from opposition. So the Labor primary vote in the last federal election was, I think, 33% or somewhere near there. So very low. They get there with compulsory preferential voting. Obviously, the Greens and Labor preference each other, so that sort of they piggyback each other in that way. But again, it's interesting. I think there's a trend that I've noticed. I'm a regional MP. I live on the north coast of New South Wales. There's a real trend happening. There's a real city-country divide that's happening in this country. You would have seen too, to back this up, the stats on this is you saw in the Queensland election just the other day that we won seats that we have never won before in the country. Even when Campbell Newman had his complete landslide victory, we didn't win some seats around Rockhampton and other regional centres in Queensland, and we won them this time. Country people and city people are seeing things very differently in this country at the moment, which is interesting. And then even within the city, and where you live is interesting, and then even within the city, there's a divide happening between western suburbs, if you like, of Sydney and Melbourne, and the city elites, as I call them, or the city elite MPs that I call them. And that's going to be interesting. It's hard. We need the Liberals I think the Liberals will be winning some seats in the suburbs that they've never won before. And I think they'll be in the western suburbs of the Aussie, the Aussie family who just want to be able to pay their bills, want to know the lights are going to turn on when they turn on, want their family to get ahead. And I think we'll be winning seats there, and the Teal seats will be interesting, but it's going to be a tough road there.
Yes, it will be a very tough road, specifically in those Teal seats, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity, as you said, in Western Sydney, also in outer suburbs of Melbourne as well. If you look at the Voice result, they were very, very strong no votes there. You mentioned the city-country divide, and I'm grateful that you've mentioned that, because that is something that has really popped up on this podcast that over the last couple of years. It popped up during The Voice when I interviewed an Aboriginal elder. She said there was a huge divide between rural Aboriginal people and city Aboriginal people, and it was the city ones that were pushing The Voice, and the rural ones didn't want it at all, but their voices weren't getting heard. The other big issue that it pops up is with this rollout of renewable energy across the country. Now, I live in Zali Steggall's electorate. She's pushing for a lot of this stuff. She wants a reduction in emissions by 75% by 2035. She's way on the bandwagon with solar panels and wind turbines. But on her very own website, she says she doesn't support wind farms along Warringa's beachfront. So she doesn't want it in her backyard, but she's quite happy for it to go to places like Coolah and Dunedoo and Dubbo, where those people feel completely underrepresented by government because their electorates are so massive. Now, your electorate of Page basically goes from the Queensland border all the way down to Coffs Harbour. Firstly, I don't know how you cover that much area and campaign. I mean, it must be a massive effort for you to jump in the car and get around your electorate. But do people in rural communities feel like that from your perspective? Do they feel like there's they look at Canberra and they see so many MPs in there pushing their their views, and people in the country don't really get that much of a say?
Absolutely, Stephen. And there's two issues I want to cover. The one that you've just raised with the energy. So I actually gave a speech in Parliament too not long ago on Zali Steggall, and I call it where the teals and the green sit sanctimony and hypocrisy corner, because Zali Steggall, there was a proposal from a climate change group within the seat of Warringah, and they were serious and genuine, and good on them. They were going to walk their talk, that they wanted to put a hectare of solar panels on North Head, and they wanted to put about 6 wind turbines on North Head. And Zali Steggall was approached, she was the MP at the time, was approached by the newspaper there, and she said she didn't believe that it would be culturally or environmentally appropriate for that to happen. Now, that's fine, right? That's fine to not have your 6 wind turbines and your hectare of solar panels. But hey, there's nothing culturally that we have to worry about, or environmentally that we have to worry about. The fact that we're going to need millions of solar panels in the country and tens of thousands of the wind turbines in the country, and build a new transmission and poles and wire system to do that, apparently that's fine. And that's why there's a lot of hypocrisy and sanctimony around this issue. The other issue that we get to, Stephen, I just want to touch on briefly, that I think there's a difference between the city and the country. I'm the Shadow Trade Minister and Tourism Minister. Our 4 biggest exports are coal, iron ore, gas, and food. Now, they all come from the country. There's no coal or iron ore or gas or food coming from any city. We see that, we work in it, we see it, we're with it, and we see it happening. And we have a great appreciation of that. And I think, again, to sort of highlight the teal MPs, they don't. And, you know, and we're not the poor cousins out here. We're generating the wealth creation of this country. But we're spoken to, I think, very sanctimonially by some of those inner city elite MPs that they know better. And this is how you should farm, and you shouldn't even actually mine some of that stuff, and we'll do this instead. Well, that's where we're feeling not listened to by them.
It's crazy because we're taking our cheap, reliable energy and coal and uranium and shipping it offshore so other countries can have cheap, reliable power, and then we're importing their solar panels and wind turbine components that are pushing up electricity prices. People make the argument that they're the cheapest form of energy, but you only have to look at your electricity bill to see that it's pushing up electricity prices. Like, it's just a complete and utter madness that we are going down this path, in my opinion.
Well, we have, you know, the quote that we often tell people, so they, you know, get the reality of this out there. Of the 20 biggest economies in the world, we are the only one of those countries that is not going to have a future rely and have nuclear as part of that energy solution. It's crazy, right? Every other of the top 20 countries in the world are doing that. And I just saw some reports, you know, just the other day, that there's a lot of countries now looking to build a civil nuclear industry because of that exact reason. But apparently, what could go wrong with Chris Bowen running the show? What he believes that's not part of it. I mean, I even had a question in Parliament this week to the acting Prime Minister Miles. I shadowed Don Farrell, who signed an agreement in IPEF as Trade Minister, that IPEF was going to explore and look at nuclear as part of a deal that we signed up to. So, but not good enough for Australia.
It's just crazy. To think that guy is pulling the levers and has any sort of control just blows my mind. But look, mate, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm very conscious of the time and the time constraints. But before we let you go, I just want to let everyone know where they can go to keep up to date with everything that you're doing. It's your website, kevinhogan.com.au. I'm sure there's a lot of information, all your links to your social media, and a whole bunch of information on there. So I encourage everyone to check that out. But the federal election is coming up. I hope that you get a lot of support based on just your comments in Parliament just recently. I mean, you really stood up for this country and stood up for the people of this country. Now it's up to the people of this country to stand up for you and help you on your campaign. What's the best way for people to reach out to you and maybe volunteer or just donate some time or whatever it can be?
Yeah, well, look, thank you, Stephen, and thank you for that. And thank you for what you do too. I mean, you're one of those important new platforms that people are getting their information from that isn't necessarily edited out by some of the left-wing mainstream media outlets. So good on you and good luck to you. But look, anyone if they go to my website or my Facebook page and or any of those pages, and there's contact details of how to get in contact with me.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Okay. Well, look, again, I appreciate you coming on. I'd like to maybe have another discussion with you about some other issues in the future. But again, thank you very much for pushing back against this misinfo bill. A lot of people are very concerned about it. I think it's a fundamental pillar in Australia to have free speech, and we need to be able to resist bills like this at every single turn. I don't think it depends on what side of politics you're on. Everyone in Australia should be pushing back against bills like this. So much appreciated, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, Stephen.
No worries. And for everyone watching, please share this out. People should see that there are good men and politicians in Parliament pushing back and helping the Australian people. So please share this out, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.